There we go. So it should pop up a little message that it's recording. All right. Oh, now it doesn't want to share anymore. That's fine. Okay. I'll just reset it again. This thing is just testy. Okay, let's see. Alrighty. So, today I wanted to cover the topic of thriving as a working grad student. It is not easy, but it's definitely doable. And through my time at iSchool, I've been able to, come up with a couple things that really helped me. So hopefully they'll be helpful to you as well. All right, so let's see here. No, why does it keep stop sharing? Okay, give me one more second for technical issues, as per usual. All right. And I was just about to say how Canva is so helpful. And you're like, well, it can be. All right. All right. So let me share that part. If it won't do it in presentation mode, that's fine. We can just go through it slide-wise. It's not too complicated. So anyway, basically, just to kind of give you a little bit of background about myself, I am obviously, a grad student here as well, but I'm also I work at a public library. I've been working at that public library for about 18 years. I got to the point where, I kind of hit the top of the hierarchy without the degree, so here we are. Um, but I also teach as an adjunct professor of sociology. So that's a lot. That's a lot of work and time and energy. And so trying to kind of layer on top of teaching, working in the library, going to grad school, it was a lot. So, you know, um, I can, authentically say that, I have that experience. I know what it's like. And, I do have a couple tips and tricks I can share with everybody. All right. So I don't know if you want to pop it in the chat, if you want to, unmute or whatever. Just kind of want to get a sense of like where people are at as far as if you're working full time, part time, or, are you more interested in the session for some of the tips or tricks? Is it more, an issue of, time management that you're worried about, or like kind of just where your feelings are right now?
I'm happy to start. Um, Hello, everyone. My name is Tia Phillip. I am currently based in Colorado Springs, Colorado. I work as a circulation team coordinator at a college library here in town. So I manage about 16 to 20 college student workers at the circulation desk. And that's a lot. They are
Yeah.
such sweet human beings at that age, and they are experiencing a lot socially, emotionally, developmentally, and they like to share that with me, which is great. Uh, and I love being a part of their journey, but it can also be quite emotionally draining at times. Um, I am deciding grad school because I want to continue. I similarly have kind of hit the top of the pay range for somebody in my position, and the only way to move up would be to acquire the degree. And so I always knew that librarianship was a pathway for me at some point. And so when that, you know, yearly compensation letter comes out and it's like, hey, FYI, this is kind of the end. It's like, oh, well, might as well just go to grad school. I also volunteer and take classes that are not for school, not for grad school, and I'm a screener for film festivals, and so I'm doing a lot. And I am very excited to be here today to learn about time management skills, kind of the expectations and course loads in some of these early classes. I am I just finished Info 203, so I'm excited. My next one is I think Info 200. So that's the, you know, big writing and all of that. So I'm a little nervous, but I am excited to be here and learn from you today. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you. Anyone else want to share where they're at? Oh, I should check the chat. Duh. Awesome. Okay. So Jessica's based in Santa Clara, works full time as a researcher at a government agency. Nice. Interesting. Yeah, and work and family is already enough. So then adding grad school on top is a lot. Um, yeah, I think that is a good question. I think those are, you guys kind of both hit on the, what kind of time commitment are we looking at here, right? Because I know for myself, I don't like spare time. There is no such thing. So trying to gently fold in grad school is, yeah, it can be kind of daunting to worry about. Um, but I promise you, I think, you guys are already on track if you're already kind of spinning those wheels, working all that, time. Um, then you're kind of already used to balancing and having to navigate the stuff. It's just a matter of taking it to another level, basically, um, of just grinding. And I think that's kind of something that came to me from adjuncting. Um, to make money as an adjunct professor, you got to teach like 1,000 classes and trying to even remember where I am and what I'm doing. You know what I mean? Like which class has the exam and which thing. Oh, so I think, I kind of took some of those tools that I've learned by accident, usually from mistakes, and then kind of incorporated that into what I've done in grad school as well. Because it's not easy. But again, nothing worthwhile in life is easy, unfortunately, but it is what it is. All right, Bianca says, awesome. Oh, nice, nice. I love another sociologist in the mix. That's my favorite because that's my adjunct in sociology. So I'm like, yay. Um, yeah, so okay, so let's see. You see working on oh yeah, graduated last year. Nice, congrats. Currently working part-time as a library aide in a public library in the Bay Area. Nice. Yeah, so yeah, the Bay Area is very expensive, definitely. And yeah, I think the real key too is that finding still time for your life, for joy, for the things that make it worthwhile, because otherwise the whole like life becomes a slog, right? So speaking of which, let's jump into time management briefly, right? And I say briefly on purpose because I know you have lives and time and things you want to get back to. So hopefully I can impart, what I've learned, as efficiently as possible. So anyway, obviously, needing excellent time management skills is kind of, step one, right? So, the, the things that work, just like, for anything else, there might be tips or strategies that will work for you. Try them. If they don't, that's fine. I feel like sometimes, we have different brains and the ways that we interact with these things. But, um, for me personally, when I start at the beginning of something, I can feel very overwhelmed because I'm looking at the entire thing instead of just taking it bit by bit. And I think that's how I kind of alleviate a lot of my anxiety around the time management is, looking at the big picture, forcing myself to look at it at the beginning, sit down with the syllabus, go through, I don't know, I'm old school. I like to actually like write down stuff on I got my little Pusheen calendar. For me, I'm analog. I like to kind of write down, see the syllabus, look at all the assignments and see when they're coming up and kind of write it down for myself so I have that visual thing to go back to. It just helps me using that calendar to better organize it because otherwise it's popping around in my brain and I can't keep it all straight. I know for some people though, if you're more interested in or if you're just younger and, doing these things digitally are better, scheduling these things into like, I don't know, your Google Calendar, Apple Calendar, things like that. So maybe a week before it sends you an email to remind you or something like that. For me, that would stress me out. So I wouldn't want that. I like having the visual thing I can kind of set aside when I want to turn my brain off and then pick it back up when I'm ready to work with it. Um, Organizing the coursework is honestly the key, right? Knowing the kind of major stuff you have versus the little stuff. And some of the professors are going to vary, right? Some of them are going to have multiple assignments you have to do each week that are little. Some will have like one assignment a week. Like I just finished a couple of summer classes where one of them was structured to have a discussion every week. And the other one would have like a week or so off sometimes, but then it would be like three things due at once, which would totally stress me out. So I like to kind of divvy those things up, knowing that they're coming and start drafting them ahead of time, right? So, the workload's going to kind of depend on the professor, and some of those are going to mean, you're going to have to sit down for kind of a reasonable chunk of time. So it depends on how much you're working on it, though the human brain can only focus for so long. So something I talk about with the students that I teach is that there's a reason that normal class periods in college are only like an hour and 15 minutes because that's how long your brain can focus for. And then after that, it's gone. And so oftentimes we beat ourselves up and think we have to spend more time than we're spending. But what I found is that actually spending small chunks of time over time is much more effective than trying to sit down and just suffer through it, right? Like let's say you're working like a 5-day work week and you have these 2 days off. You want to have like a day where you're like living a human life, spending time with friends, family, things like this, other obligations, God forbid. And then you have this other day to work on it. Some people will just park in front of the computer and stress and just kind of force themselves through it. And what I found is more effective is if I have those 2 days, I'd rather spend 30 minutes the first day, kind of draft out what I'm looking at. Oh, I have these three things to do. Let me get the prompt. Let me kind of give my basic, you know, draft of what I want to respond to, and then set it aside, right? And then you come back to it later, which is actually really helpful because oftentimes your brain is going to keep working on it in the back of your head when you're not looking at it. So it can be a kind of a way to do that. So what I suggest is block out periods of time that you know in your week that you can use for grad school, but they can honestly be as short as 30 minutes. That's enough time often to get through the readings that you have to do, or, to kind of draft out a discussion post or, you know, uh, find articles for a paper you have to write or something like that. I honestly feel that doing that and then setting it aside, it helps your brain, it helps you, and then you have that time to kind of go back to it after. All right, so that kind of leads into setting boundaries, which is more about setting boundaries with the time, right? Sometimes we don't really know our limits until you hit that limit. And, for me, when I hit my limit was I had a semester where I was teaching 10 classes, and that was bad. And I would never do that again. I got pneumonia. My body like physically shut down. And then I had to not work for 3 weeks because I'd pushed myself so hard. Because I just kept not taking the time to rest. I was like, oh, I don't want to take the time off. But sometimes that's what you need. Sometimes you also need to bake in the time to back up, right? So, it's hard to find where that balance is going to be as you get into grad school, especially in an online program. It can be very easy to forget about it, to dismiss some of the stuff because it's not like, if you're like me and you traditionally went to school in person, physically being there reminds you that you have to do stuff, right? Being online can be great because you have the flexibility to do it whenever you can, but it can also be challenging to keep yourself on task, right? So, my example I love to give is Sergio, one of my best friends. And he's not here, so it's fine. I can say this about him. And he would say that this is fair. He likes to torture himself. He likes to sit down in front of a computer for 12 hours and get 3 hours of work done, right? And it was kind of honestly watching his process that broke me of that when we were in grad school and then later teaching together. I mean, I guarantee right now he's probably sitting at the offices of our college, sitting in there right now, doing not much, right? Because he thinks that to get this stuff done, he has to kind of be tortured. And I think, no, I just got to do these couple things, make a little list, just these four tasks, and then I'm out, right? And that's how I'm able to still have a human life, right? So sometimes setting time boundaries of, something as simple as saying, okay, after 9 p.m., I'm not going to work on things anymore, or something like that, depending on your work schedule and when you need to get up. Or saying, okay, you have a weekend day to do this and you want to knock out a few things, just blocking out, okay, for those 2 hours, I'm going to work on that. And then after that, you know, putting it away. Because, whether you're finished or not, again, your brain's going to keep working on this stuff while you're not. And when you come back to it, you're going to have fresh eyes to see the stuff a lot clearer. Because it's counterintuitive, right? You think, no, I just got to keep pushing through it. But that's when you get that brain freeze or that writer's block kind of thing where you don't know, oh, I don't like this word and I can't keep writing this paper because I need to fix this word, that kind of stuff. Sometimes you just need to actually give your brain that rest, right? Take that break. And, if you still have the energy and the motivation to do it, keep going. But for a lot of times, it's like you're not going to be struck by the muse to write that paper. It's more that if you can kind of do it in small chunks at a time, like I always outline. I teach a writing class at Cal State Fullerton, always make an outline. Like always, always, always. Because the more complicated writing we have to do in grad school isn't as easy as past papers where you just kind of had like intro, body, conclusion. You could keep a couple thoughts in your head, you could write it out. But stuff like this, like you were saying for Info 200, right? One of those mandatory classes. You're going to be writing a lot for it. A lot of those ones you have to write a lot of blog posts, which can also be time consuming. So, even if it's just a short post, I always make a real brief outline, boom, boom, boom. And then I can just go bullet point by bullet point, knock those things out. That way, if I don't finish it, who cares? Put it to the side, come back to it. And all the emotional energy that's connected to not getting it done, like evaporates, right? Another thing I would suggest is try, and I say try because, sometimes stuff goes a little sideways. To create a routine that separates grad work from your personal life, right? This means, blocking off that time. But when you're in that time, just working on that, right? So, okay, let's say today I say, okay, from 5 to 6, I need to put in some time on this thing. That means I turn off all notifications for everything else, ignore the outside world, just focus like a laser beam during that time, knowing that I will get enough done during that time, knock it out, you know, um, and enough that I can build upon it later, right? Without having to then compromise my life because I feel like I'm just too old at this point to stay up all night doing the all-nighters and things like that. And I do think this program that you're starting is manageable. It's the professors are great. They're flexible. They work with you with that stuff. They know, you're going through it and you're working. So if you're able to kind of set that boundary for yourself, it's just going to be really helpful. Okay, the other thing is staying motivated. Oh, that can be difficult as well because obviously, um, you know, when you're tired, it's the end of that week, you've been dragging, you've been working, you've been doing all this stuff, and then you still have to do homework, you still have to write a paper, So, what I think has really helped me is keeping my goals in mind. So it's interesting you guys alluded to that as well. So I had that situation of I hit the top of my pay scale and also, between you and me, there's a few people that got promoted in my system that I was like, that guy? But then I couldn't apply for those things because I didn't have that piece of paper. So when I start to get kind of frustrated or a little overwhelmed there and I want to keep myself motivated, I'll think about that. I'll think about like, what is this for? Why am I doing this? Right? I'm doing this, well, for, my financial security from now until forever. I'm doing this to have more opportunities. I'm doing this to have more, financial support, not just for myself, but for my family, right? That kind of thing. So sometimes, is why are you doing it? Just career advancement? You want to change fields because you're not where you really want to be. Maybe it's just more stability, you know? Like for me, that's definitely what it is. Adjuncting is great, but it's a grind. So I'd love to teach at one school and then work in a library instead of three schools because it's too much. But anyway, write it down, make it visible, right? Give yourself that kind of anchor that makes the work feel less endless because you know you're pushing through for something, right? That it's not just drudgery, you know, you want to, kind of keep yourself eye on the prize. And then there's going to be times when you're like, oh, I just have to write this. Like I honestly had a class where I took it and I was like, I really don't know what's happening. Like I'm reading the readings and I still don't really know. Sometimes you do just kind of have to push through. But when you have still the time to rest, you have the motivation to keep going because you know why you're doing it, it makes it way easier. Like I found out that I like making databases. Who would have thought that? Anyway, another thing is give yourself some grace, meaning you're doing a lot. So if you didn't have the perfect paper, or if, sometimes you run out of time because that's what life is, right? You just kind of have to give it your best that you can at that point. I know for myself, for grad school, they typically suggest that, for every hour of instruction that it would be, you have a couple hours of work on the side. I found that it's easier to do that, to break that down into like 25 or 45-minute chunks of time, especially for the readings because if I want to be able to synthesize the information and then, apply it in the ways that they expect you to like cite stuff in your discussions, papers, etc. If I sit down and try and read for 2 hours, I'm not getting all of it, right? A lot of it's just going out the brain. So honestly, having just those times where sometimes I'll take the stuff with me to work and just sit there on my lunch break for 25 minutes of that while I'm eating, sit there and read a couple readings, write a couple notes to myself, right? I always love to take, some very direct notes as soon as I can so that I don't have to store it in my brain. I feel like the less strain you put there, the less you try to just carry the information in your head, the easier it becomes, right? To actually apply and use this stuff. As soon as you look at your own notes, you're like, oh, yeah, I remember that. And then you're able to do it instead of just trying to read it all at once. I would suggest another thing is, silence your phone when you're doing that stuff because, man, we know how the dopamine addiction works. Like you hear the ding and you're like, huh, what's going on? Oh, someone so's texting me. You know, um, just give yourself that time to focus. Um, and then don't feel guilty when there's those times when you can't 100% focus, right? Because sometimes life gets in the way and it can be something that is difficult to overcome, right? You can't be 100% on everything at all times. Like let's say you get sick. I had that happen. I got COVID for the first time during the program, and trying to write a paper during that was very, very difficult, right? So I kind of had to just let it go for what my expectation was of what I wanted the grade to be, and just know that this was the best I could do in that particular circumstance, right? So, kind of give yourself that grace. All right, avoiding burnout. Ooh, so this one's really hard because I feel like anyone that's trying to balance as much as someone who's working a lot and going to grad school is gonna face some aspects of burnout, right? Especially near the end of the semester when everything starts to become due. That's why, my biggest tip is start even just drafts, one draft, two draft early on, just kind of get something on paper. Because as soon as something's there, building upon it is easy. When you have to start from scratch and you just have that like frustrated, tired brain and you're trying to put something on the paper, it can feel very overwhelming. Then you end up like my friend Sergio, where you just stare at a computer for 12 hours and hate yourself, right? So don't do that. But the real key with burnout too is that, life is going to keep happening. It's unavoidable. Like on a personal note, my mom unexpectedly passed away during my second semester of the program, and it upended my whole life. We ended up moving in with my father who has Parkinson's. Um, it was just like completely out of the blue, trying to plan for a funeral, write an obituary while I'm trying to also do homework. Homework seems so unimportant at that point. And I feel like, there were even points where I thought, why am I even doing this? Right. But I just came back to, what are my goals for this? Why am I doing this? Right. that helped me get my motivation back to kind of, you know, refocus. Because obviously, like when you hit grief, like your brain just becomes fog. There's not much you can do about it. But it was more about, you know, just trying to do the best that you can in the circumstances that you're in. And again, give yourself that space to just know that, sometimes maybe it's not the best, it's not the best post or the best paper you've ever written, but you hit the keys that you needed to and you got it done, right? Like I said, a lot of the professors are very understanding and they want us to succeed. So they're very helpful. Like if you have questions, if you're like, I'm not really sure if this is going to work or not, they'll look at an early draft, they'll, kind of give you that feedback, but you have to allow that amount of time for them to look at it and get back to you, which isn't possible if we start last minute, right? Another thing I would suggest is do things that make you happy, like continue to live your life, right? And this is can be even one of those like, what is that, Parks and Recs, like treat yourself kind of stuff, like, little things even. The stuff that gives you that dopamine boost, right? So you know, having some little celebrations kind of built in because you're doing a lot. Like you will get through this stuff and you'll feel like, whew, you climbed a mountain. Now celebrate that a little bit. You deserve to, right? That really does help me kind of pull back from it a little bit when you start to feel that burnout. Um, Another thing, actually really fascinating, something I learned in a course at SJSU was this idea of kawaii and the brain. So, kawaii being basically like cute stuff that's endearing, right? Like this little guy over here, just stuff that's cute. Turns out there's a bunch of actual like peer-reviewed published research that shows that when you look at cute stuff, it actually helps your brain focus. So like if I have times when I'm having a hard time with it, I will go and just like smother one of the cats, right? We have three beautiful cats. I'll just go smother one real good. Or like Moodang. If you haven't seen any pictures of Moodang, oh man. Like Moodang kept me going for like 8 months. So, it's really fascinating how actually looking at a thing like that, anything that makes you go, oh, right? That can actually, help your brain pay better attention, have more focus. And that's like research from the National Institute of Health. So, anyway, that can be a really helpful way to kind of draw back when you start to feel a little bit burned out. All right. So, one thing I wanted to ask then too was what do you think is the stuff that you're the most concerned about? I'd say. And hopefully, I don't know, after talking about that, have I alleviated any of your concerns? That's kind of what I'm looking for, hopefully. So go ahead if you want to unmute or pop it in the chat or anything like that. Um, you know, what is it that's kind of concerns you about the balancing part? And hopefully I can alleviate it. Because like for myself, I'm pretty much at the end now. Peer mentoring, I'm doing the e-portfolio next. That's that's the big mountain that you climb at the end, but I can see the light at the end, so I'm still pretty motivated. Ooh, good question from Jessica. How many courses per semester? So I went all in, right? Like because it was about potentially career opportunity, stuff like that. I wanted to just knock this bad boy out. So I've done full course load. I mean, obviously the first semester you do the Info 203, which like Tia already knocked out. Like, congrats on that, because that's the way to get that is absolutely the way to do it. Do it before the semester starts. Um, I always took the two classes every semester, including summer, which is not fun. I would say the summer one, especially because the summer is only 10 weeks instead of 16 weeks and you'll miss those 6 weeks. But I think honestly, it just if you're strategic about which classes you pick to take during the summers, it's still manageable. Like I just finished two this summer, got an A in both classes. I don't know why, like the job I'm going into doesn't care about my GPA, but I'm nuts, so I do. And I want to do like the best I can in each one. And even with like the full course load, I've been able to do that. Um, so yeah, great question. Because I think, summer is a great way to kind of shave off a couple semesters, give yourself a little less time in the program. Because if you're like me, spending all this time doing this is difficult. And, the money that you're spending as well, you know, it's a whole thing. So, um, yeah, I definitely think that doing the full course load was scary a little bit at first, but it definitely worked out for me. I have had classes with other people that have done like more than two a semester. Um, I wouldn't recommend it only because depending on the courses, like, for instance, you're taking the core courses at first because they're prereqs for everything else. So if you're taking like Info 200, that's a hefty one, right? So taking that with, 203, 204, or 202, something like that makes sense. But then later, when you get more to the electives, there are ones that, are slightly more, course load than others. Like I made a mistake, what was that, spring? And it was all because which classes were available switched. And I ended up with two different classes that are materials classes, as they call them, one for young adults and one for middle grades. And for the ones for middle grades, I think we had to read 30 books for middle grades. And the one for teens, we had to read, or we had to make 30 like very comprehensive blog posts and basically create a mini library collection. Incredibly fun class, great class. But man, did that test my time management because you basically had to crank out at least one blog post a week to keep on track. And I did not do that. And then it started to really catch up with me, later on. And then, because you can see the dates on the blog posts and they start getting more and more grouped together towards the end. But, the professor was great. I learned a ton. But one of the resources I would share about that is actually, I was going to talk about like some of the tools is like the iSchool website. They have all the information about the courses, but then they'll tell you, like, they'll give you the syllabi, which I think is incredibly helpful because who you get matters. And there are classes like, actually, the ones I just took this summer, 282, 287, like the seminar classes, where the actual topic changes depending on the section number that you pick. So, like, one of them I took was about like metadata question mark, and then this another one I took was about using social media for competitor analysis. So they change depending on that stuff. So it's really helpful to look at their website, have a great idea when you're going in about what the kind of course is, and then you can see ahead of time what kind of workload it has. And if it looks bad, you can steer clear of that when you don't have that time, right? Um, oh, see, for Tia, I totally agree with that, right? I just saw your thing in the chat. And this is my second master's too, and I was like, whoo, I knew how bad it was last time. So I was like, what am I doing to myself? Right? So, it is scary, right? And I totally think that what makes it actually the best about going to school online is that you have more ability to kind of be flexible with when and how you're doing this stuff, right? So, the group work. Great question. Okay, so, um, group work. There are a few classes where this is a thing. Like I took one where the guy had us meeting like twice a week. It was a lot. It was honestly a lot. I saw some of those girls more than my family. Like it was a lot. But what was helpful was, you have to do that thing in 203 where you talk about roles and figure out blah blah blah. Your group dynamics. Kind of setting that stuff up right away is helpful. And the fact that everyone else that you're going to be grouped with is other people in the same boat that really do want to just knock this bad boy out and kind of be on that same page, was really helpful to me. Honestly, for a lot of those ones, what we did was we kind of traded off who had to do the major lifting for that particular session. So let's say we're meeting, once a week for this project. the one person will write it up this week, next week it's that person, next week it's that person. So you kind of actually get a little bit of space sometimes when you're working with the group because they're helping pull some of that weight too. But it is a pain in the ass trying to be like, when do we meet together? How do we get, four different people's schedules to work at the same time? Like this one girl in my group, I felt so bad for her. She was the only one on the East Coast, and all our meeting times, she would be like yawning and almost falling asleep because it'd be like 9, 10 p.m. where she was at, which was wild. So, yeah, I do think that can be kind of scary, but I think, at least in my experience, I've been very, very lucky to have great groups that, we've been able to be like productive, kind of split up the work in an equitable way. And then you feel, I don't know, more validated, like you're not going to school in a silo by yourself, just kind of having that. And then oftentimes we had kind of side conversations too of like, hey, who'd you take for this? Would you suggest that professor? Stuff like that too, which was really helpful, I think. So, oh, did I just make myself do that in the thing? Anyway. Okay, let's see. Bianca said, possible burnout scary. Absolutely, right? Yeah, no, I totally get it because when you have to do a thing, like a deadline, a thing like that, it doesn't matter how much you might be interested in the topic. It's like you're being forced to do it, right? So that's why I just trick myself usually with that stuff. I will give myself those breaks. I will go smother a cat, right? Something like that. And then just kind of take it small chunks at a time, and then it becomes less overwhelming, right? I think for me, the intensity of it comes from looking at everything. Like at the very beginning of the program, you know how much you still have to do, and there's a ton. But honestly, set up, like, kind of try to set up your plan at the beginning. It'll always change, and that's normal. But just kind of put your head down and take it chunk by chunk, right? As you go through, like, just this semester, just that semester, whatever. Like for myself, all of a sudden I'm like, wow, I'm almost done. I just have to do, basically my e-port, which is a whole nother thing. And then I'm done, right? So there is this, like, I think a helpful way to get past some of that burnout stuff too is to just think about how much you've already done. Like when you accomplish those things, when you turn those things in, like remind yourself, pat yourself on the back, like acknowledge how much work you put in because, you have. And, this too shall pass. You will get through this and, you'll be the better for it, right? For having to kind of push yourself through that stuff. I totally agree with the reading for fun thing. Oh man. Actually, no. Side note, like that class I was talking about, the young adult materials class, I had to read like 15 new teen books and they were fantastic. Like it was for class, but it was kind of an opportunity to read some stuff I wanted to read anyway. And it was actually like really cool and eye-opening to see how, newer young adult literature is changing. Because just side note, I'm a person that orders that kind of crap at my library. So now I can recommend a lot more stuff because I actually had to like read some of those. So I still like to read for fun. I can't help myself. I'm insane. I got my Goodreads challenge. So oftentimes for me, it's like audiobooks, stuff like that, where you can kind of put them in on the sides because I totally get that. You don't want to just put your whole life aside and only spend your time doing grad school. There will be stuff you can, skim. There will be stuff that you have to intensely read, but um, I oh, that's okay. Another good question from you was what would be a good class to take during the summer? Ooh, definitely I would recommend some of those seminars. It's just you gotta find the right one. Whether it's the seminar in library management or seminar in information science, those ones have been pretty good for me over the summers because they're kind of specific to a certain thing and it tends to be that the summer ones don't have as much dense stuff in them, but there are a few classes you would like. I would never take that young adult materials class over the summer. If you had to do those 30 blog posts, that would have taken me out, right? Yeah, I see that, Bianca. Same. My Goodreads challenge is always like, you're 4 books behind, you're 5 books behind. I'm like, I'm trying. But there are still ways you can kind of integrate that into what you're doing in the actual schoolwork, which helps in a lot of ways. You know what I mean? And you might seem surprising, but a lot of the stuff that you have to read for classes is actually really interesting. Like for Info 200, you have to do your whole information community thing. My research paper was awesome. Like it was really interesting. I learned a lot because I used skateboarders as an information community, and that was interesting. For the research methods class, I had a actually really interesting time. No, the topic I picked, that was on me. I picked historical analysis of women running for president when Kamala was running. Like the semester the election happened. So I wouldn't have suggested that to anyone else because that was rough. But anyway, really fascinating stuff. Like I learned a lot through that. And the paper I got from it, because I actually did a content analysis, I can publish that now if I want to. Like that's a whole nother resource. So, you just kind of got to think of it that way too. And absolutely like, look through those syllabi. Look through, there's this like, oh, it says here on the tools thing, the Facebook group or the Discord group. People in there will spill the tea about who to take, when to take them, stuff like that. That can be really helpful, especially as like faculty circulates through what they're teaching. So I would definitely say, look at that, use that as a resource, definitely. Um, oh, I was going to say the King Library. So beyond obviously having to look for articles for papers and stuff like Info 200, King Library also has a lot of the textbooks that you need to buy. So instead of buying them, get them on there. Like a lot of professors put them on their course reserves. And since we're not like on campus and going physically into the library, they will let you download either chapters or the whole book in PDF form, which is super helpful. I mean, I save myself, I don't even know how much money always checking the course reserves. And even when I was shopping for classes and trying to figure out who I was going to take, I would often look at like, well, do they have a free book? Like, is their book on reserve? Um, because that again really just made my life a lot more convenient. Um, Another thing too is that some of the professors they might not have their book on course reserves, but there might be that same textbook in the system somewhere. So, like let's say it's at another Cal State, you can still request chapters to be sent to you. They'll scan it and send it to you within 24 to 48 hours. So, highly recommend using that as a tool just to kind of save yourself some money. Um, oh, Google Drive. So obviously with your school account thing, you get access to all like the Google stuff, right? What I would highly recommend is set up your Google Drive like folder per each class and save literally everything into there. Like every discussion post, every paper you write, every, thing that you have to do with your group projects, all that crap. Throw it all in there. Because later, when you do the e-portfolio, which you don't want to hear about it now because it sounds scary now. I don't either because I'm about to do it. But it's basically like this culmination of proving that you've met the competency for all of these different things. And trying to find the evidence to support that can be a pain, right? So, just side note, there's whole other things about ePort, so I don't have to be the guy to tell you, but basically ePort, um, you're going to have, I think it's like 14 different, it's like A through O or something like that, of different competencies. And you'll see these on your syllabus. It'll say like, oh, this paper, fulfills competency H or some crap like that, right? So that's why having the syllabi on the iSchool website, even the old ones, is really helpful because then I'm going to be doing that very soon, going back through them and seeing which classes covered which competencies. So I can go to that class, go to my Google Drive, be like, oh, the paper for 200 covers this competency. Boom, cut and paste that paper. And then that becomes my evidence, right? You still have to write a little thing like, what does the competency mean? And, how do I interpret it? And how have I mastered it? And then you give three pieces of evidence, right? So having a clearly set up Google Drive where you save everything from the get-go is going to make your life so much easier later. So just side note on that, definitely do that. Um, what else? Oh yeah, definitely join at least the Facebook or the Discord group. Um, they will give you some really helpful inside baseball about some of that stuff, who to take and when and that kind of stuff. Writing Center, you're paying for it out of your student fees. They do free tutoring, like very helpful. Definitely do that. It doesn't matter how good you are at writing. Like I literally teach a writing class and I'm still like, please, someone look at my paper. Right. So that can be Grammarly as well. If you haven't used it, obviously you can make an account for free as a student and do it. Like definitely do it. It takes your paper to that next level. And even with just a discussion post or things like that, because they're looking for professional academic language. And when my brain is tired, my brain is not academicing, right? So it's really helpful to have that kind of stuff to find where I didn't put the comma or those things to really tune it up a little bit for you without it having to be, labor intensive. But same thing with the Writing Center. They will do free tutoring. They will look at your drafts of stuff. Just a good resource that you can use fully online. Another thing that a lot of students start without knowing is that you can get free software, right? So some professors want you to turn in everything in like a Word doc, but you don't want to pay for Microsoft Word. You can download all that stuff for free, and you just have to sign in with your credentials from school. And I mean, beyond just Microsoft, there's fun things like you want Photoshop or something like that. Absolutely, great resource. Canva is an incredibly helpful resource. It's what I'm using for this adorable slides right here. There's going to be times when it's either group projects or just presentations that you're doing that you have to like make something, make some slides. Canva's really adaptable. It's got cute stuff. It's just, you can type in kind of keywords like library. Things will pop up that are kind of attuned to it. So for me, it just gives me that little bit of dopamine while I'm doing it, right? Because instead of it being just like stark PowerPoint presentation, it's got this like cute little thing in there. So I don't know. That tends to, at least for me, kind of help a little bit with the dopamine. So I highly recommend it, all this stuff for sure. All right. So in conclusion, and of course, if you have any questions, let's do that too. So feel free to pop them in the chat. But you got this. That's like my biggest thing is when I was starting this, I needed to hear that because I did not think I had it. And I did. I actually did a lot better than I thought I would, considering I was working like at the beginning of this, I was technically working four jobs because each school is its own thing. Um, Thankfully now I'm just down to the one school right now and the library. You only have two emails to check instead of four. So that's too much. It's too many Outlook accounts. Um, but even at the beginning when I had all of it and I was scrambling, it's still very manageable. More so than I thought it would be. So I'm really happy about that. When you're motivated to do it, you're going to remember that it's there. For me, I had had some experience with online classes before, but never a fully online program. That can be kind of stressful, just knowing it's all on you to kind of plan it out and do. But if you have those tools, like I said, like I externalize, okay, this day, this time, this is happening, um, just to give myself a heads up so I can visually look at it. Anything I think it's such a stupid example, but Harry Potter, Dumbledore does that thing where he takes the memories out of his head and pops it in the thing, and then Harry like goes into it. Um, that's kind of what I feel like is the best tools for some of this stuff is externalizing it from the working processing of your brain, putting it aside, like whether it's writing it on a physical calendar you look at, whether it's, putting it as a notification in your phone for later so you can kind of look at it when it's convenient, just externalizing the stuff because my mind loves to be like all the time. If I'm like, oh, did I do this? Did I do that paper? Did I do this thing? So yeah, there will be times when you're kind of like, what? But having those ways where you find those tools that work for you will make it so much easier. Also, it is going to be difficult, right? It's not easy. There's a lot of time involved. But if you are able to kind of chunk it into small chunks of time that are convenient for you, and give yourself that space, it's actually, you know, surprisingly better. Like I know, Tia, you were saying about your previous experience in master's degree. I had the same thing in a previous master's program. It was bad. And it was the point where I would caffeinate so much to stay up for those classes. And it was just, I know I'd be working all night on stuff or doing all nighters. Not this time. I think the entire time I've been in this program, I did one, like stay up till midnight once. And that was just, it was a rough week, right? But it wasn't the norm. So I think that it's definitely reasonable to, get it done, but then also just be able to close that laptop, go back to your human life, spend time with loved ones, do those things. Because if you don't, like it says here, find time for joy and connection with loved ones. I mean, that seems obvious, but really, if you don't have those times baked in, then the rest of this just like it's that balance you need to make it worthwhile. You know what I mean? So does anyone have any questions or anything? Hopefully I've been able to alleviate some of the tension because I promise you it's not going to be as bad as you think at this point. And I wouldn't say it's not work, it's work, but it's definitely doable and you guys are going to kick its ass. Okay, Tia says that's comforting. Good to okay, I'm glad. Because that was my hope is that I've been through this and gone through a whole bunch of, like I said, like my mom and all of that stuff, like just rough stuff, but still have like had a very positive experience in this program. So, I'm sure as you try to adapt it to your life, you're going to find, you know, hopefully some of these tools will help you to, kind of remind yourself why you're doing this, keeping that focus, and that's going to help, kind of take away some of the stress and the tension. Because I think sometimes our stress and tension just comes from not knowing, the fear of the unknown. And then when you see, like, no, you just kind of try to make your plan, chunk it out in time, say, hey, that's due next week. Well, I'm going to spend 20 minutes on it right now. Work on that. And then later when you come back to it, you're like, oh, thank God I spent those 20 minutes and knock it out easy. Right. So anyway, oh, Bianca says, uh, definitely reassuring. Okay, good. I'm glad. Cause yeah, that's where I'm at. Like, I feel like I'm speaking to myself back then because I was real stressed going in too. And it's because you're looking at the big picture, right? And you will get there. So even if you don't do the summers or stuff like that, if you feel like it's better for you to take that time off and rest and recuperate, I totally get that. I talked to a lot of people that was their opinion. Or I know some other students that I've talked to, they just did like one a summer so they could knock out a little bit, but kind of not be as stressed out. I did too because I'm nuts. I just thought in for a penny, in for a pound. You know what I mean? But just be strategic about which ones. That's my biggest suggestion. All right. Well, that is it. Thank you for coming and hanging out. I really appreciate it. They're gonna send you this link later, so no worries on this one now. But yeah, thanks and I wish you all the best of luck in the program. Thanks. I hope all of you guys have a great evening.